Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Sisterhood Speaks. I am your host, Six Keys, and I am joined by my co-host Lorena.
Hi, everyone.
Our special guest today is Kim Belair. Hi, Kim.
Hello.
Kim is a writer and narrative designer who has worked on numerous AAA games, including Assassin's Creed Syndicate and the newly released Valhalla. She also does sensitivity reading for various games and is also the co-founder and CEO of Sweet Baby Inc., a narrative development company. Thank you so much for joining us, Kim.
It's good to be here.
How are we all doing at the moment?
I think all things considered pretty well. I think it's an exciting day. It's the release of Assassin's Creed Valhalla that we're recording on. I'm not sure how much that's going to that's going to date the episode, but yeah, it's an interesting time.
I'm sure it's going to be fun. But yeah, we've been playing it a bit, and I'm pretty excited about it.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm always excited to hear what people think of it. It's weird when there's so much time between script lock and the last day that you write anything on a game and then release. So it's almost like even as I start to see, reactions to little things that I did or that a friend of mine on the team did, it's really fun to finally see it with fresh eyes, I guess, when it's out.
I've been seeing a lot of positive reactions to it so far, which is encouraging.
Definitely. It's always nice to see. I think no matter what, when you work on something like this, even though the size and the magnitude of the game and the talent of the team, you feel very confident in. I think that all those doubts and all those fears and all those uncertainties creep in. But yeah, it's really nice to see the reception now.
Yeah, definitely. So you're like a jack of all trades. There's so much that we could be asking about, but what I want to start with is sensitivity rating, because this was a new term for me personally, and I'm pretty curious about how it all works. Can you maybe tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, for sure. So with my company, Sweet Baby Inc., we're a narrative development company. And for me, what that means is everything from, writing and narrative design to world building, to character development, to scripts, to punch-ups. And for me, what's one of the most important things that I think I try to bring to any work that I do is representation. Is that feeling of, is this authentic? Is the diversity that we have in this game authentic? Does it come from an honest place, and does it come from a real place? And for me, what sensitivity, the work that we do in sensitivity is often tied into the work that we do in narrative, because I don't think they're necessarily two different things. When you're reading through a story, I'm thinking, okay, one, does the narrative work? And two, how does the narrative represent the players, not the players, but the characters in it? How does it represent the world that it's creating? How are people going to take that world, and how are people going to find themselves in it? So sensitivity reading is looking for blind spots in the work. It's looking for things that could, rub people the wrong way. Things that could be insensitive to a certain culture or a certain kind of person or a certain identity, and trying to not only mitigate that, but to craft the story in such a way that, we're not oppressing anybody, we're not being unkind to anyone, and we're representing folks in a positive, supportive, or engaging light.
Are you able to influence how many or in what manner women and minorities are included at the planning stage of a game? Or can you only give feedback on existing characters already in the script?
So for me, that's why I tend to focus, my form of sensitivity reading or risk assessment and the work that we do on building the narrative. Because I think there are two kinds for me, kinds of sensitivity work. And one of them is that, you are presented with something that's more or less finished, that's already in there, and kind of your job there is to tell someone, okay, this might be offensive. This character feels, inauthentic to the identity that they're supposed to convey, or this, this plot point is a trope that's, have negative associations with a given kind of identity. And that's one kind of work that I used to do a lot more, and I try to do less of it now. Or when I do that kind of thing now, I prefer to, try to spread that work among a team of experts, a team of consultants from different backgrounds who can address, my own blind spots and kind of create a panel on that. Because that's an area where, there's not a lot of creative input that they're necessarily going to allow us to give, because they're so far along. So a lot of the time, that kind of sensitivity work results in, cuts of certain things or slight changes. But what I prefer to do, and I don't really call it sensitivity reading, but I think of it as just, bringing representation to something, is trying to build a narrative and a story that include moments and elements custom made to bring representation and joy to people. Because that's kind of where, Sweet Baby lands on it. It's that I did a talk at GDC called Representation as Innovation. And for me, the idea that, we can create something new, create something exciting, create something fun, if we go in and from the ground up build something that includes everybody, it's a lot stronger.
That's really interesting. I'm kind of curious about, I don't know if you've run into this with Assassin's Creed in particular, but you talked about, tropes and, maybe because this could be a stereotype, or, that this could be harmful to people because there are already certain attitudes maybe associated with it. And these are historical games. So those tropes they are based in history. Is that something that you've run into, or?
I think for something like this, what you have to remember is that the history that we're aware of is heavily biased by the culture in which we live and have lived since then. So when we create stories about colonization, we're generally going to hear from the colonizers. When we tell stories about, oppression, we often sugarcoat it because a lot of those oppressors are still, systemically and structurally with us today. So we are still influenced. And so a lot of the time, I think the problem that we run into in anything historical, any kind of story like that, whether it's a game, whether it's a movie, a TV show, whatever it is this feeling that everything we know about the oppression, about the structural, the structure of their society, the stuff that we think is, a given, feels natural to us, but anything that feels unlikely or any, anomalous things end up getting kind of brushed aside. So when we look at the Victorian era, for example, we look at that and we go, oh, well, that was probably, everybody was white, is what we see in media a lot of the time, right? We look at these things and it ends up becoming super white without actually inviting the fact that there was actual diversity there. There are many instances of people in all levels of society from a ton of different backgrounds. But when we look at it through our lens now, and we start casting something, people go, no, that can't possibly be. You're just forcing diversity on it. You're just tokenizing people. But ultimately that's actually more accurate, but it doesn't look accurate to us. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's more limiting also in what kind of stories you can tell. If people are always expecting those same things.
Exactly. There's an expectation that we have. And for me, there's this thing called the Tiffany problem. And it's how I like to talk. It's one of the ways I like to talk about, historical diversity, in that the Tiffany problem is that Tiffany was actually a fairly common name hundreds and hundreds of years ago. But if you write about that, if you actually say, hey, I'm going to put a character named Tiffany in my game set, centuries ago, people go, oh, that's such a modern name. That doesn't sound right. So the reality of the situation, which is, yes, Tiffany was a name back then, feels wrong and ahistorical if we look at it today. And I think it's the same way when we put diversity into the past. People go, oh no, but you're just putting diversity in. They don't even feel ready because they've been exposed to so much, whether it's whitewashed, whether it's just, colonized media, that they go, oh, there can't possibly have been diversity back then, because my understanding of it was that this was a homogenous time. And so I think I look at it like that.
Or they make excuses for it, like, yeah, well, sure, okay, maybe there were some women in World War One that were on the front lines, but it was only in these specific situations, so we shouldn't show it in the game.
Exactly. It's you have so much of that happening. And for me, there's so many leaps that we already take with history. There are so many things that we decide are true. And so many of the protagonists that we choose for our games are exceptional by their nature. So why not, why not take that further? Why not say that, yeah, we can tell different kinds of stories? And frankly, we see so many of these eras in history through one lens, and then we forget that these same stories, the same society was experienced by so many different kinds of people. And I would bet a lot of the time that those stories are more interesting, the stories that take place from a perspective that's going to show us things we don't know. I have a book called The Black Victorians, and it's such an interesting read because it's something I had never really seen a lot of the time. I had kind of, we all kind of think, okay, well, that was slavery then, and so that must have been how everybody saw things, but there were incredible things being done all around the world, and we rarely explore that in media because it doesn't fit what we're used to. So I think there's just so many opportunities to kind of change that and to show people both exceptional and unexceptional from different backgrounds.
That sounds like a really interesting book. I have to look into that.
Sure, I recommend it.
Just to add to that a little bit, I was really surprised when I saw the movie Victoria and Abdul about Queen Victoria and Indian Muslim servants. And yeah, like so many people didn't know about it, specifically because the people around her were very careful to erase all evidence of it historically because they were just so upset by it.
Which I think is that's so interesting to me because it's a deliberate attempt to erase things. It's and yet we look back on it and we go like, oh, we take it at face value. We just assume because we don't know about it, it didn't happen. And we don't think about the fact that it's not just that we forgot, but people actively worked against preserving this information.
Absolutely. So that's why I do like Assassin's Creed so much because I feel like there's so much room to tell stories that, there's probably a lot of people in history we didn't know about who did significant things who are just kind of marginalized and erased. And I feel like that's always my frustration when I come across people who are like, well, that's not historically accurate. And I just want to ask them, but how do you know?
Oh, absolutely. And I think, when I see people writing historical fiction and trying to diversify it, a lot of the time there's this pressure they feel, I think, to justify everyone who is, for example, not white. They have to go like, oh, well, here's the story of how I came to be here because you accept all the white people, but you don't accept these kinds of people. And for me, I like to see pieces of media where it's not explained because that's not necessary. If you see someone who's different in that timeline, then it's probably because it happened, because this existed, and we don't need to necessarily know every detail of that story of how. We don't have to justify every time we want to step outside of the norms. We can just have it happen and realize that that's almost more representative in a lot of ways.
Yeah, like I was really happy with Ned's representation in Syndicate.
Absolutely.
He was just there, and nobody questioned it, or nobody asked, well, how did you get here? And that whole story. I feel like that's still. I hope that things have gotten a little better about trans representation in games since then, but at the time, at least, there were still a lot of even in RPGs where they were, ostensibly they were accepted as part of your crew, but there was always that option to ask them about it, and it always felt a little wrong.
Agreed. I think there's something really, for me, it's just, there's something really beautiful about being able to just kind of understand that that's a character's story, that you aren't necessarily entitled to it because your experience of that character is going to be what they want to tell you. I think we often give protagonists this really invasive way of connecting with people.
Yeah.
But I think there's something nice about going like, I'm here, this is my identity, this is who I am, and this is how I live. And that's the part that's going to be interesting.
I wanted to ask, do you often face pushback about your suggestions when you do these sensitivity readings? And have you ever felt like your advice was ignored?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's part and parcel of the process. Is that a lot of the time when a project that I'm on is purely a sensitivity reading, it's often done so that they can feel like they've done their due diligence. But a lot of the time, especially when it's late, the problem ends up being like, hey, we can't change these things that you suggest. We might agree with them. The team or the client might go like, hey, this is really cool. We like this idea. Unfortunately, we've already recorded all of these scenes.
So is it at that point, do you feel like it's just a formality that they're asking you to look over the text even though they know they can't change it?
I think a lot of it is to create answers. And this is being a little inside baseball. It's a little, I don't want to dismiss the practice, but I think that a lot of the time it's more for what are people going to be angry about when this comes out. It's more about like making sure that the PR is good. It's so that when someone says, hey, we find something offensive about this, they have an answer for it. And I do respect that. Like I think that it's important to think about how your product is coming out into the world and being ready to answer and discuss the important issues that people bring up. But isn't it better when you do that work as part of the development process? I think for me, the reason that I don't do a lot of pure sensitivity readings anymore, and I kind of more flag things and try to make them different within the narrative, is that I want to make sure that the representation that we bring to the stories is organic and holistic and part of the creation of it. So like one of the ways that I talk about it a lot is this, like, if you call someone in to tell you what you've done wrong in your already completed project, the best outcome that you can get is to kind of sand down the rough edges of your story, is to say, okay, there are these rough bits and these little places that are going to hurt people. We're going to sand those down and make sure that they're not there. But what that ends up with isn't necessarily something representative. It's just something that's inoffensive. It's something that doesn't outwardly offend a group of people or doesn't say anything about a certain kind of person, but instead it doesn't say anything at all. So the thing that I prefer to kind of shape it as, and what we do at Sweet Baby, is it's more about saying, here's some opportunities that are ahead of you in your story. Here's a place where instead of just saying, hey, we can put you in and not make an offensive caricature, how about we make a character who's truly representative, truly authentic, and brings joy to the people that you're trying to represent? Because I would rather see that. I'd rather see a character who brings some small element of reality to me, who I can recognize as being made for me, than just someone who looks like me.
Right, and that's how it should be.
Yeah, and because there's so much joy. I mean, when you feel, I think that one of the things that we don't talk about enough in life is just like, we're trying to bring joy to our audience and to our players. At the end of the day, what we're making is something that is a toy, that's something that is fun, something that engages and excites. And so if I can create something, if anyone can create something where a person who doesn't get to see themselves represented in media not only gets to see themselves represented physically, but gets to go, oh, I can see that they know about my life. They know who I am. The little details in the way that you make food, in the way that you do your hair, in the way that you relate to things. Those are the things that bring people joy. And that's where the representation lies. It's when you sit down and you go, oh, that's me up there. It's not just something that looks like me, it's me. And so that's kind of the approach that we try to take, that I try to take in anything that I do, to say, how can I make someone feel represented?
Just recently, I saw this post about the upcoming Spider-Man sequel, the video game, with Miles Morales. And it had this scene where he can do sign language. And
Yes.
I saw so many people react to that with joy and happiness, like, oh my God, I feel represented, I feel seen.
Yeah, and that's And that's amazing. To me, that moment is something that I think, if we look at the traditional, like quote unquote traditional audience for video games, or what we think is the audience for video games, we go like, okay, it's going to be primarily straight cis white men. And that's how we a lot of the time people go, okay, that's who video games are really for. And then everyone else is kind of like a special interest group. And to me, I think that audience has seen themselves represented all the time. There are 1,000 protagonists who are white cis straight men. And I think that we've almost lost touch with the joy that they are receiving by seeing themselves represented, because we just go like, oh, that's just how it is. We've kind of like tamped that down. But the reality is we all deserve to feel that joy. We all deserve to inhabit a character that feels like us. We all deserve to meet characters in games, or we all deserve at least to have a different experience. And for me, if I can enjoy playing a game as, let's say Nathan Drake or something, right? I think that someone who is more demographically similar to Nathan Drake could probably enjoy playing a game as me, because it represents a different experience. And that's what when I say representation as innovation, that's what I mean, is that it's something new for everyone to enjoy. Like if I am playing a game and I get to explore an authentic version or an authentic set of references to another culture that is done with sensitivity, with care, and by working with people from that culture, I'm getting something new, something that informs me, something that allows me to experience innovation. And people from that culture are getting something that they can use as a touchstone, so that they can look at and go, this feels really good for me. And that's the power that we have. And I think it's, narratively speaking, a direction that we should be going a lot more.
I will add that as someone who is myself like a person of color, I always notice when a character seems deliberately crafted to have that sort of like identity versus something that's kind of just seen like it's been thrown in. Like people will often accuse characters of, they'll accuse games or media of having diversity for diversity's sake. But there's definitely, you can definitely notice a difference in quality when it's like a detail thrown in at the last minute versus like this identity has been specifically crafted. Like this person
Oh yeah.
is who they are because like they've been designed that way. So I always really appreciate when I feel like devs like really kind of commit to a character and give us like a different sort of protagonist.
Yeah, I fully agree, because I think you can tell, you can see when something is made to represent you, versus when something is just made to make, I guess, the dev or the creator feel like they've represented you, right? Where I think, you can tell a lot of the time when you're reading like a female character, there are moments, even if the writing is very, very good, where you can just tell like, oh, that was written by a man. And it doesn't have to be, and it doesn't have to be offensive. Like, it's not necessarily that you go like, oh, it's some kind of really like crude thing, or you're feeling like, no, it can be someone, you can have an incredibly talented man who just wrote the hell out of this character, but there are small moments where you go, oh, I can see that in real life, that character's lived experience wouldn't match up with what they're saying. That little societal touchstones of, a woman's experience, you just don't see it there, and you go, oh, I can feel that there's something missing. And I think that is, you can feel that across the board. You see it all the time, I think, in, a lot of Black characters, for example, you see and you go, oh, this character was written to be the Black friend. They were not written by, or even maybe consulted with, a Black person, because the stuff they're saying doesn't quite line up with the experience. Because I think, and I'm sure that, you can speak to this as well. Whatever background, whatever identity you have, it doesn't just, as much as it doesn't make you who you are, it doesn't define you completely, but it absolutely informs the way that you live. I know that, whether or not, if I were white, then I might have a completely different outlook on certain things. If I were from any other culture, I might have a different outlook. But everything that I've done is a result of who I am. And my ethnicity is part of that.
it's already an older game, but I could talk for days about the Christina missions in AC Brotherhood. I love that game, but there's a mission where you basically, as the male protagonist, you stalk this girl to
Yes.
her home. Oh my god! Like,
yeah, I think, and it's those areas where you go, wait a second, if you asked, and you can, again, if you can make it work, that you can write it around it so that it becomes true in the world of the game, right? You can say, oh, she liked you doing this, therefore it's okay.
yeah, yeah,
But then if you think, like, if you asked, a lot of women and a lot of marginalized folks, like, hey, does this feel comfortable to you? They would probably answer like, oh no, absolutely not. This feels really
yeah,
and I don't find it romantic. But I think that's where that disconnect is, where you go, oh, something's being shown to you that's supposed to connect with you, but it's clearly not written for you.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I definitely have those moments where I take a step back and I'm like, well, yeah, I'm definitely not the target audience for this.
Yep. And that's hard, because we should start looking at that in the same way that we look at a lot of different kinds of ludonarrative dissonance, right? When something that we see doesn't match up to what we're doing. I think there's a lot to be said about that, because if I experience that, not only is it just taking me out of it for a moment, because I'm going like, oh, I find this uncomfortable, but it's also, for example, you might be less sympathetic of your protagonist then, because he's doing something now that you don't like. And so for you, you're like, oh, I have to now participate in this action that I don't fundamentally agree with. So I feel disconnected from the game, from the character, and that means that I'm suddenly not aligned anymore, which is what we aim for as designers, right? To make the player feel aligned with what they're doing. Even when that thing is morally ambiguous.
I've definitely had a few missions where I'm like, yep, this is a terrible idea, but the game's going to make me do it.
Yeah. And I think, sometimes I as someone who works in both AAA and indie, I'm well aware of like all the constraints. There's sometimes when you have to go, look, we're just going to put a strong and convincing narrative wrapper around this thing that we can't really work around. But at the same time, I think there's a lot of work that we could do, just change those things from the beginning. And if we started including more people in that process, we probably never come to a point where we have to have this happen. We can probably figure out another solution.
So I'm going to use that opportunity to kind of segue into my question. And that's, when it comes to diversity in the writer's room, how is the video game industry currently doing?
I think I want to think that it's improving. I hope that, I think this year especially, we've seen a lot of promises about that. I think there's been a lot of social movements, a lot of awareness, a lot of talk about how we do have to do better. It is our responsibility as a society and as an industry within that to be more inclusive, to be more diverse. And so I hope that we're on the right track. This year, while working actually on Suicide Squad, Kill the Justice League with Rocksteady, was the first time that I was in a writer's room with another Black writer. And I've been in the industry for 7 years, and he's been in the industry for about 15. And I don't, like, that for me is wild, is like, it's hard to believe that can still be true, to say like, that's it. So I think that's where I currently stand, where I'm like, I want to see more of it. I am starting to see it improve, but I think there's still a ways to go, especially in leadership. I see a lot of, I think, junior writers that we're bringing in, a lot of, first-time writers, a lot of really super talented people who are bringing in from a bunch of different backgrounds. But a lot of the time they're entering into systems where they haven't promoted a lot of people of color. They haven't promoted a lot of marginalized identities. They haven't promoted a lot of, LGBTQ folks. They haven't promoted a lot of, and basically anyone who looks like them. So they get into the industry, but all of, say the lead or director positions are still held by the same people. And that's, I think, where we have to start really working, is realizing, who has been working here for a long time, who's already here, who can become leaders and provide a space. Because it's one thing, I think, if you say, hey, I'm going to be a male lead and I'm going to create an all female team of writers, like, cool. But if they come up with a bunch of ideas that speak for them and you still hold all of the power to say, no, I disagree, I'm going to go ahead and do this, then are you really helping? It's about also saying, hey, there's space for you in leadership, there's space for you in management, there's space for you to move up the ranks. So I think we need to do better with that. And that's where I'd like to see a little more focus. But yeah, I would say that we're improving the industry in that way.
It's really illustrative what you said, that you've been working on in the industry for 7 years, and that was like the first time that there was another person of color in the same room. Or
I've had another Black person for myself, but I think that a lot of folks of color have had that same experience. For the most part, it's very rare still.
Yeah, it's kind of staggering to think about.
Yeah, but it explains a lot. I think the treatment of all these characters.
I guess kind of related to that is there an issue with retaining writers from sort of like marginalized groups? Like, is it, and if so, is it kind of an issue of they're kind of thrown into these environments where it's difficult to succeed, or is it just kind of the strict limitations, it seems like, on being able to really just advance your career?
It's all the above, I think. I think one, we have a lot of, as I was saying, we have a lot of folks who are coming in new, right? Who are juniors, who are enthusiastic, who want to join it and who deserve a place. But they come in and they end up getting very little support, very little understanding of what it is to be marginalized, very little understanding of how that's going to affect them, how people are going to treat them, and also, very little understanding of how their background is going to inform their work. And I think, unfortunately, that burns a lot of newcomers out and makes it so that they're stuck in these situations where they're still working under the status quo. And so, the room, let's say the writer's room has maybe diversified, but are they being treated well? Are they being cared for? Does that matter to the management? A lot of the time, the answer is no. And similarly, I think the amount of work that women and marginalized identities have to do in this industry means that they often do have to do all that extra work. Because when we talk about something like sensitivity reading, and the reason that I still like it and still do it is that I think it's important. But often that work is being handled by marginalized people on these game teams. So before they're willing to pay for someone to come in and do this work for money, they'll often ask, let's say you have an Asian writer on your team, and you have one person who's representative, and you're writing a game, let's say, about like an Asian culture. So every time that you have a question about it, you go, oh, I'll just ask her. So you keep going back to her every time. And at the end of the week, you've spent 4 hours of her time, and now she's a little bit behind on the script that she's supposed to deliver because she lost that time. So then, she goes to the manager, and the manager says, well, why are you falling behind? And because they don't value that work, because they think, oh, I'm just asking her a question about her culture, that's going to be easy for her. They don't value it as work. And so, now all of a sudden she's overwhelmed because she's doing that. And that happens so often that becomes free labor for people to do, that I think it means that, the marginalized people on your team are going to do additional labor, be it emotional or just practical.
Oh no, I've definitely heard quite a few stories, not for game development necessarily, but even in like animation, I feel like that's definitely an issue that kind of crosses industries, really. So that's really
I think it's in everything. It's every time you have to answer a question about your identity, it's taking time from you that is valuable. And right now, the way that I think about it, and the reason that I am happy a lot of the time to talk both about writing a narrative and also diversity is that I currently have the time. Like I and by time, I don't necessarily mean like hours of the day, because who has enough of those? But I have the energy. I have the capacity to do it because I would have wanted to have more people talking about it when I started out. And so there might come a day where I'm like, man, I am tired of talking about this. But for now, it's something that really, it gives me energy to talk about it and to relate to people and to hear folks' experience with the same thing, because it inspires me, I think, to work towards changing that.
It's good to keep in mind because the game industry already has a high turnover rate in general.
Yeah.
And I can't even imagine what it's like for marginalized people.
Oh, and that's exactly it. And I think with the pandemic and seeing the way that things are changing, we're kind of shining a light on a lot of that as we become, now we can work remotely. So immediately you have a different set of people you can and should hire, but there is a feeling that, why wasn't this happening before? And, I also credit a lot of discussion with Black Lives Matter, because you saw that the way that went through the video game industry, right? Like we saw so many responses from studios to say, we're going to do better, we're going to do this and that. And I want that conversation to continue, but I think it has to be ongoing if we want that to actually bear fruit.
So it sounds like it often sounds like studios will make a commitment to recruiting more talent from diverse pools, but it also sounds
Yes.
like really there needs to be more of a focus on how they're going to help their employees succeed. Like I don't know if there's any sort of like career development resources or mentorships available, but it sounds like that might be an area where the industry needs to step up.
I think it absolutely does. And I think that people and studios especially need to start thinking about, why do they want diversity? Like, we all should have it. It is a good thing. And I could sit, and I'm sure we could all sit and talk about why we want diversity for hours. But a lot of the time, I think people see diversity as a check mark you can just kind of tick off. You can go, okay, we have a diverse team, perfect, next. But the question becomes like, why do you want a diverse team? Are you actually doing it because you want to hear different perspectives, because you think it's important and it's going to make your product, your company, and your experiences better? Or do you just think, well, now I've done it, it's politically correct? Because the value of diversity is in the ideas that we can bring from our experiences, is in the skills that we can bring, and the different ways that our lives inform our work. And if we start looking at that, it's about it informs everything that you do. So why not make that the focus? So if you have a diverse room, how are you behaving differently than you would if you had a completely homogenous room? Do you know what the value is? Do you realize what you're getting out of it?
And you were mentioning also about how people can progress in the company, not just that there's maybe some stagnation, that they get hired, but we've also heard this past summer about some things like it's about how you make people feel comfortable and safe in the company. Like we've heard some things about like the higher ups were inviting certain people to like strip clubs and bars, and like that already excludes like women or Muslims who may not want to drink and stuff like that. So I'm sure there's a lot of that kind of stuff going on where only certain kinds of people who are open to those opportunities will get promoted.
Yeah, and that's exactly, I think, the issue. Like you've hit the nail on the head there. I think that I would love to see more of a focus on promoting and on figuring out why these differences matter and how we can actually use them to our advantage and create a healthier and more inclusive space. Because this summer was absolutely buck wild in terms of the things that were finally revealed. But I think that what's most relevant to me about what we saw this summer was how many people weren't surprised. Like
that was a little
many people were like, yeah, I know, I wasn't. I think that a lot of people like myself were surprised that it was happening. They were surprised that these names were finally being made public. But there were people that, myself and so many people like me already knew about and had tried to do something about and had tried to flag to people. And the way that these things work is eventually you just get tired. Eventually you can keep telling people, hey, this is a problem, this is a problem, this is a problem. And you get tired, you get exhausted, you get traumatized, all these things, all these different things happen, and just create a space where you're too broken to even keep pushing back. And that's exactly, I think, what we saw this summer.
Yeah, the summer, I think, was a eye-opener.
And that's a huge thing that contributes to retaining minorities and women in the writers' room.
Yeah, it's
That you get
are you
tired
being
of
heard?
fighting these same fights over and over again.
Yeah, and it burns people out so fast because why would you stay in this space where you're not going to get any respect? And especially, you know, when you say something about it, they tell you like you're the problem. You know, this person's perfectly nice to me,
Yeah.
you know, a man, let's say, and then why are you complaining about it? And so then when you have a meeting and you need to invite this predatory person, then all of a sudden you're like, well, if I invite the predatory person, nothing's going to happen to me. But if I invite the predatory person into the same room and I also invite this person who's been complaining about him, then there's going to be, you know, it's going to be a whole thing. It's going to be drama. So I'll just not invite her.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden she's on the outside, she doesn't get to contribute, and the system continues. And that's just kind of like one framework that I often think about, because you know, we don't have enough respect or enough kindness to the marginalized people and to the vulnerable people that we know. And so they are seen as less necessary as versus like a predator who often holds a position of power, and you go, okay, well, I don't want to screw up the project, so I'm going to keep this person in charge. But these people who are complaining, well, I'm sure we can replace them, and then the team will be quieter. And this just happens across the entire industry. And it, you know, I see it a lot more. I have seen it in AAA in the past, but it happens in indie as well. It happens in all these spaces, and it happens outside of. It happens everywhere. This is a societal issue, but I think in video games, it's often especially visible.
Yeah, I think for some people who kind of ask why didn't people report it earlier, they don't really understand how much pressure there is to just not rock the boat or to not come after people in power. Like
Oh, yeah.
I think it kind of went unnoticed a little bit, but if anyone paid attention to what happened at Lab Zero Games, the guy in charge who was accused of misconduct just fired everybody. Like that was his response to it.
And that's it. That's perfect example of like what happens when you know people speak up. They are putting themselves at risk. It should be like, you know, I would love to live in a world where that was putting the person who was being accused at risk, but instead it puts, you know, anyone who said, hey, this is a problem is now out of a job because they did that. And so that happens to them. And who knows? Maybe they go like, okay, cool, that's good. I don't care. I'm going to find other things. But imagine now a bunch of other people who may have been victimized by other predators looking at this and going, oh no, if that can happen to them, it can happen to me. And so you have to be ready to put so much on the line just to speak up. And then a lot of the time when you do, nothing happens. You know, I am I am not someone who necessarily stays quiet about a lot of these things, but for me, I got tired of being loud because no one was listening. You know, in what experiences I have had, I've seen, you know, I've been warned by, I find myself warned by people going like, hey, watch out for this person. Hey, this person has done this, like, be careful. And I can go, okay, well, I'm going to report this to somebody. And then nothing happens. And then all of a sudden I do that again, and then nothing happens. And then eventually you can pick, and this hasn't, you know, necessarily happened, or maybe it has, I don't know actually, but if I tell someone who I think I trust, hey, this person's a problem, there's a chance that that person goes, okay, I'm going to tell them that you think that. And now all of a sudden your predator knows that you know and knows that you're causing problems. And so they're going to work extra hard to target you. And so now you're just in this, you're embroiled in this, and you're doing it all while you're trying to do a 40-hour-a-week job. So of course, how can you manage all of that and also do your 40 weeks of work or your 40 hours of work? You probably can't. So you work overtime to do it better, or you miss out on a certain amount of stuff, and all of a sudden you're not as valuable as them. And everyone knows that you're the one who complains, and you're not as fun as them. But I've seen so many people, especially women, especially women of color, just get treated so poorly, and eventually just say it's not worth it. This might be their dream. This might be the thing that they love to do, but is it worth the abuse, and is it worth the gaslighting? The answer is no.
Yeah, I think as a fan, one of the reasons why I was really kind of hopeful after this, like during the summer, is I was really kind of heartened by how many people in the community stepped up to support victims, to, reach out, let them know, hey, we believe you, to kind of, demand some accountability. And I think like some of us are paying pretty close attention, especially to Ubisoft, on some of the statements they've been issuing on what they're doing to change and what they're doing to kind of address the situation. But because we are on the outside, because we don't really have a look at what changes have taken place, I wonder if you could give us any sort of tips on what sort of changes should we be looking for? What sort of signs of progress should we be looking for?
I would hope that you could start to see it or hear it from the people in those positions. Like, I would hope that you'd be able to talk to folks and see them, take actual steps. And when, let's say a corporation says, hey, this is what we're doing, I would like to see that echoed by actual employees. Because a lot of the time I find that, and I think this is something that actually precipitated the call out of the games industry, is that a lot of the times you'll see corporations putting information out there and none of the employees really seconding that. And so I would love to be able to hear it from more people who can speak more candidly about it. I would like to hear people be able to say, yeah, here's what tangibly changed for me. I think also, in terms of the representation that we have, I would like to see more of it and more of it and something that's done more, I guess, authentically. I'd like to see more discussions of the content that we're creating that feels more, that feel more free. Because a lot of the time I think, and I'd say Ubisoft is notorious for this, is something says like, oh no, this isn't political. And and the game is absolutely taking a hard line on a specific political thing. And you're like, wait a second, how can that possibly work? How can you make a military game, for example, that isn't political? What is the military if not an expression of politics? And so for me, that's that's super irresponsible. But two, I would prefer to live in a world where there's a certain amount of accountability, and whether that's, public or just narrative accountability, I want to be able to say, yeah, here's what we made. Here's the responsibility that we take for the thing that we've made, and we're happy to talk about it. And sometimes there are going to be tough questions that get asked. There are going to be people who look at a given game and go, hey, I think you've misrepresented this. I think this is incorrect. And I wish that we lived in a space where we could go, yeah, it's not where we'd like it to be, and we want to work harder on that in the future, or we screwed up, or even just like, well, here's why we did it that way, and here's what we think. But instead, I think you ended up with this weird kind of gray zone where you're like, oh, well, obviously we don't like these things in real life, but in the game, blah, 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 and it just becomes nothing. So I think a sign of actual change would be the willingness on the part of teams, on the part of companies, on the part of individuals to speak very openly and very candidly about the choices that are being made, the reasons that we value or have abandoned, or abandoned representation. If you say, hey, I made a game that's not representative, I would rather someone say, well, that was a deliberate choice, rather than go like, oh, well, I'm not really political, I don't really get into, like, because by doing that, by saying, hey, we're going to make a game that's, let's say, like every character is going to be white and is going to take this form. That is a choice. And I wish that we would look at these things as choices instead of going like, oh, well, don't put politics into your game. Like, no, let's have a discussion about the reasons that we make these things. And we don't have to dissect them until they're boring, but at least like say, hey, yeah, I have a point of view.
It's always wild to me when people say Assassin's Creed is not political. Like it's literally about
everything
this
is.
anarchist group who kill politicians. Like,
Yeah.
how is
Yeah,
that
it
not
is-
political by
That's
its
it.
very definition?
Yeah, because what gives anybody at any point the right to decide that this is what's better for the people? That is politics. Politics is founded in that kind of decision, and yeah, it's fully deciding who gets to rule, who gets to not rule, and I think it's wild to say anything.
And the games themselves, they reflect that mentality. They do, like, they always begin, of course, with this description that it's made by a multicultural team of various religions and all that. Like, that's already at the beginning of every game. But also in the games themselves, you find like letters and documents and database entries where they kind of reflect this idea. And it's just wild to me that the people can still claim that they're not political.
For sure. It's something that I think once we've hit a level of maturity, like a level of maturity in the industry where we can talk about that, where we can say, yeah, here's a position that we hold on it, I think we're going to be a lot further. Because to me, it's so foolish to just say like, oh, we don't do that. We just don't address politics. Like, you absolutely do.
There is a weird kind of level of secrecy in the industry that you don't really get as much in like the movie industry, for example.
I think you're right. I have to assume it's because we are. I think the positioning of a lot of these products is very singular. We say, okay, this is the kind of thing we want to make. These are the kinds of games that sell, and these are the kinds that don't. And until the past little while, I think that there's a real oversaturation of games that were fully combat based, and that was kind of it. And that doesn't necessarily lay the foundations for something that's very inclusive or representative.
Yeah, it's still kind of seen as indie territory. To not have combat or have this, like, people look down on mobile games because it's seen as, somehow inferior because it's played by a lot of women. And it's like, maybe
exactly.
we should actually be looking at the reasons why women gravitate maybe towards these kinds of games more.
Yeah, and the answer is usually inclusion, right? It's usually like, oh, we're gravitating towards this because it at least includes us, or it doesn't involve the same thing. Because I do find that, while I'm not going to say like there are tons of shooting games that I love. I enjoy those games. I play them all the time, but I wonder, how many different ways can we express a character in a world? How many different things can we do? And where would we be if we had invested as much time in perfecting the feeling of that versus perfecting the feeling of a gun?
Yeah. And it's like in these kind of what people dub casual games, it's often also that you don't get that element that is prevalent in a lot of combat games, is the culture of shit talking.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And that's already that's a very toxic space for women.
Oh, absolutely. The
That's
second that they
absent
hear you.
in these more casual games. So is it any wonder that women gravitate towards that more?
And I think that's it, where some people look at that and they go like, oh, women can't be good at this multiplayer game. And then you go, hey, if I spend any time in a multiplayer game and try to talk to someone, like earnestly, if I say, hey, I want to talk strategy with this person that we're doing, and if they hear that I sound to them like a woman, and they all of a sudden start changing the way that they behave around me, whether sometimes that's with insults, with requests, or with something more crude, or sometimes it's just, oh, I'm going to treat you like you don't know about this game. either way, I'm not getting better anymore. I'm not able to, like, I'm not actually being supported as a teammate. I'm not being treated as an equal. So I'm going to, even if I'm really good at it, just get tired of that. Like, if I'm not great at it, then I might go, okay, well, I'm never going to learn because I'm just being targeted in this way. Or if I'm really good at it, how fun is it going to be for me, even if I do enjoy the game, to be called names, to be spoken to this way, to get these messages? And then I leave it, and then everyone goes, huh, women don't like this game. Yes, they don't like
Yeah.
it. And you're like, no, it's a community. And then it's being told by other fans when they go and say, hey, I also like this. Oh no, you don't count. You don't want to hear it from you. You're fake. So like, where is the room for us to enjoy something like that? Unless we start thinking about how we can actually put rules in place, put structures in place, and create, spaces both in terms of community and in terms of content. How do we create a space that is welcoming?
Yeah, that's definitely one of the goals for our community, is to have a place where you can just play and enjoy and not get like dragged on for, liking a game that everyone else likes to bash or hate on.
Yeah, that's what we absolutely deserve it. And frankly, I think that's what I always find so baffling about, like, the misunderstanding of this, because even when you have a game that you go, oh, that looks cool, and it seems to be focused to someone who's not, the like quote unquote average gamer. And I say quote unquote average because I don't think necessarily the average gamer is still describable as straight white cis male. I think there's probably probably have a better balance now. But I mean the typical, I guess, gamer. When you post something that you go, oh, this kind of game is this way, you can still see the comments that you have a bunch of really angry people going, this shouldn't exist. This is stupid. I hate it. And you're like, it's just not for you. Like, people can't accept that it's not for them. It's funny because one of the other games that I'm working on now is Goodbye Volcano High, which is with co-op. And it is I guess, like, story about a queer dinosaur high school adventure thing. And the second that went up, the second that trailer went up as part of the PS5 launch stream, or I guess previous stream, people were like, what is this? This isn't like what we want. This game is X, Y, and Z. And people were angry. A lot of people were embracing it. A ton of people were like, oh, wow, finally a game that feels like I want it to. But a lot of people were, like, ugh, what is this? This doesn't belong here. And so if even, a product that is custom made to be representative and to be different gets people angry just by virtue of existing, imagine how hard it is to exist as a fan, to say, hey, I want to sit in this room and these are the kinds of games that I like. You aren't seen as valid.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in just letting people enjoy what they enjoy.
Yeah, and that's it. It's we deserve to enjoy what we enjoy, and deserve to be free in that. And especially, so long as it's not hurting anyone, so long as it's not engaging in something that is oppressive or unkind, I think, we should make more room for it, because these kinds of games are going to build the gaming community and are going to change it. The kinds of, like, having a varied type of game, having, AAA games that subvert tropes in different ways, that's going to be how we do this.
So we do want to take some time to ask about your experience working on the Assassin's Creed franchise. We've heard a lot of discussion about the balance between being able to play as male and female characters. What are your thoughts on Evie in Assassin's Creed Syndicate?
I came into to Assassin's Creed Syndicate fairly late in production, and so a lot of the things were already established.
How do you feel about, for example, Syndicate's marketing, how Evie was represented in that?
I think for myself, that's an area where it's so clear where the marketing machine has its claws, because I look at even, the cover of that game, and Evie, who feels so pivotal and so important, is positioned, behind Jacob with a collection of kind of others. She kind of ends up kind of getting relegated to a different role. And to me, when we were talking about the Victorian era earlier, she has, in my opinion, a more interesting background, simply because of the position that she has occupied. There's so much interesting stuff that you could do with her, and I wish that there was more space for it. Being able to say, yeah, this is her story, or this is equally their story, would have been, I think, a lot stronger. And it's so hard when I'm on, let's say I'm on Valhalla and stuff, and we talk about, Eivor, we say this is who we feel she is, this is what she's like, and then to kind of think a certain way about this character for a very long time, and then kind of look at the trailer and see exclusively the male version of that character. It's like, where is she? Where is this work that we've done? And all of a sudden, just by virtue of showing that character everywhere, showing the male character all the time, focusing so heavily on the man, what happens is we assume now that, oh, it was always meant to be that way. This must be a story about a man, but the woman is the secondary option.
That was also the case with Origins as well. We interviewed the voice of Aya in our first episode, and she told us a little bit about, that Aya and Bayek were both supposed to have an equal role in the story originally, but then they decided to focus all on Bayek, and Aya became secondary.
Yeah, exactly. And that's something that I was like long distance witness to. And you can see people become disappointed. I think there are a couple of people on Twitter who had since left Ubisoft and were able to talk about it more openly. But I think what people don't see, or people don't necessarily think about, is that, like, when you make a decision like that, you're not just going, okay, this is the story how it is. You're also telling people who were excited about that woman, people who wanted to help build that woman into a strong character, finally getting to see that happen. That's being taken away from them. So their investment in that game, is now reliant on them feeling safe enough to speak up. And I think a lot of the time when these things happen, we don't feel safe anymore. We just feel like, oh, well, we lost that. We're not as important as the male character. We're not as important as this. And it just gets people down. And now, and then publicly, when people start going like, oh, well, I wanted more Aya, then people go, oh, well, she's not the main character, so you shouldn't want that. Same with, you go like, oh, we should have had more Evie. It's like, well, Jacob's the main character, and the question is like, is he? Like he's definitely on the box, and that gives him extra importance. Like the marketing and the way that we brand something influences the way that the content is perceived as well. And yeah, I think we're in this space now where no matter what, there's this idea that like, oh, well, women don't sell, so we're just going to put that on. We're just going to put this on the box, and then people are going to buy it, and that'll prove that because we put the man on the box, it sold. And I think I wrote a whole thread about this thing that it's such a fallacy, because we look at it and we go, when I was thinking about actually Assassin's Creed Odyssey, which I also didn't work on, but was the subject of a lot of talk when people were talking about Cassandra versus Alexios. And people will always, I guess, parrot this notion that, oh, well, because more people on paper played as Alexios, therefore he's the superior character, therefore we should be making male characters. And that's such a leap in logic, because what it's missing is how and why those things happen. And the reason is that a lot of the time, if you identify as male, you will assume that male character is made for you. And if you identify as female, you assume that female character is made for you. And so people choose what character they're going to play. And majority picks male because we have a largely male base. And then everyone goes like, well, see, female characters, people don't want to play them. But that's because like you gave them that choice, and there's an assumption that you're supposed to align with what you're offered. But for me, if you had said, okay, this is Evie's game and Jacob's also in it, more people would have played as Evie because you created a game where that's possible and encouraged.
Right, and it's sad that in the game itself, I don't know how it was. Like, was it always supposed to be that way, or maybe it was something that just happened during production, but what ends up being in the final product is Evie does kind of become sidelined also in the main missions. Like I played as her during Free Roam all the time, and almost I think she only had like 1 or 2 main missions where she was.
Oh yeah,
And it was
and that
they were supposed to be equal.
and that's where like you could have like if there was a genuine push, and there's some fantastic like women working on that team. There's a great team of writers behind it, and there's a great team of deciders, but everyone at some point must have decided, okay, well, this is okay, and decided to, and whether they were forced into it or whether they chose to do it, it's these choices that we end up making where you go, okay, well, her storyline ends up getting reduced, and then it gets cut, and then something else gets cut, and then because at that point now you go, oh well, she's less important because she doesn't have much to do. So if there's 2 missions to cut and one of them is a Jacob mission, one of them's an Evie mission, then it's reasonable to cut the Evie mission because she holds up less of the narrative. So it's this snowball of choices, right, from the jump that you are fighting against. So it doesn't matter how much the team says, oh, we really want to get behind Evie, we want to do this. They might just not have the power to. And so they can work within the space that they have, and they can try to make her as strong a character as they can in the time that they have. But if there's a decision from on high that says, oh, well, we don't want any more of her, there's not much they can do to fight it. And then you end up with this situation where, as players, you both feel like I wanted more.
It's always a little crazy to me that Evie really is like the true assassin of the 2 twins, and yet they decided, yeah, we're going to cut the assassin from an Assassin's Creed game.
Yeah, and I would wonder, and having only spent a small amount of time nearer to the end, I would have loved to know more about those decisions. And I think a couple times they've been spoken about on Twitter, and it would be great to look into those threads. But I think for me, what it says is that like, oh, we see her as inherently less interesting, less marketable, less important, and we're going to treat her like that.
What's interesting about Valhalla is that we knew from early on, it was confirmed by the narrative director early on, that both genders were canon, even though in the marketing they only used male Eivor like 90% of the time, or even more than that.
And that's what frustrates me to no end, because by having before launch, you have the statement that is, okay, well, these are both canon, but then you go, okay, who got the investment? Who got the live action trailer? Who got the first CGI trailer? Who got all these things? All of a sudden, everyone goes, oh, that's a story about a guy. And of course they do, because they haven't seen anything else. And I think, I wish that in fact, I wish this about so many different games, where when you can have a customizable character, when you can have a character of any gender, why don't you show something different? When I think about like Mass Effect, or you think, okay, what does Commander Shepard look like? And if you look up, Mass Effect cover, the Commander Shepard that we see is white, is usually male. And then later on, they showed like a female Shepard who also was white. And I go, wait a second, the whole thing about this is that you could create your own. So why are we still showing the white man?
Yeah.
Because then honestly, the effect that it has is that for the people who don't really care about customization, for the people who aren't going to do that, that's the default. Everything is the default. And then anything else that we do outside of that is niche. I do wish that we could have more, we could try to appeal to different communities. We try to say, hey, if this character can be anything, if this character can be of any gender, if we can do this, let's show that. Let's make that a part of our marketing. Let's make that a part of our brand, and accept how strong that is. But it's just, for me, it's frustrating, because you work so hard to say, hey, we're going to make a character who can be who you want them to be. You are going to be, we are going to think about female Eivor as either canon or equally canon. But if she's not treated that way, then who's going to believe it outside of, you or I would really care about that, because it's something that we're interested in. But for someone who's just going, oh, I'm just going to pick up a game. I look at this cover. It's got a dude on it. Okay, that's it. That's what the game's about.
In Dragon Age Inquisition, that cover art was made in such a way that you couldn't see the character's face or their race, or like they could be human, they could be elf. You can't really tell from a distance, and you couldn't really tell if it was male or female.
No, and I love that. That's where I think we should be aiming, because if the fantasy is created,
And that's what I think they should have done with Odyssey and Valhalla
Absolutely.
as well.
Because I think, if there are so many opportunities to go, hey, look what we did, we're doing something different. But for me, if I pick up Assassin's Creed Valhalla and I just see, okay, here's Eivor, even if it doesn't look like the Eivor that I have spent, over a year of my life in builds playing or considering, I can't even imagine how it feels for someone who hasn't had that experience. It feels so much like, oh yeah, that's who the character is. But you can also play him as a woman if you want, is the feeling that I think people get.
And it's always the woman is always the B side of the cover.
Exactly. Yeah. It makes it feel like, oh well, you can also do this if you'd like.
Yeah.
It feels like it's a special interest group, when in reality it's completely intended by the team to be, someone who is as worthy of the spotlight as anybody else.
Can you maybe tell us about which quests you worked on in either game? Like something that we can look out for specifically?
Yeah, for Valhalla, I handled a lot of the settlement stuff that happens, including a lot of the main story beats that take you through that growth process, that take you through the main story. I think the most unusual thing I did on the game that people can but beyond the settlement and story stuff, is I did the flighting, which is the poetry battle that you have.
That's one of my favorite activities in the game.
Oh, really?
I
I'm
love
so
them
glad.
so much.
Yeah, I still have, at this point in my career, I still have a hard time going like, oh, I'm proud of this, because because I have anxiety and I'm a writer. But those are really fun to do. I can say is that it was something that when I came on the project, being kind of talked about as a possible thing to do, and Darby McDevitt, the narrative director, kind of presented it as a possibility of something that they wanted to do, and I said, like, one, I love it, and I need this to stay in the game, and two, I'll see what I can do with it. And so I kind of very much inspired by Monkey Island's insult sword fighting, and also by kind of, I think, like, very, I guess, very poetry slam rap battle, like that kind of form of kind of cheesy recap raps, which I always find very fun, and kind of merging those two concepts into something where it's fun to go across the world now and battle people. And they always call it like Viking rap battles, and I'm always a little bit hesitant because I'm like, I did not write them from the perspective of like, I'm going to write a really good rap song, because none of these, they're not going to hit the top 10 anytime soon. But they create these really fun poems, and it's so much fun right now to have the old emails. Whenever I would write them as poems, I would send them to Darby, and having those things that just like, I wrote these really ridiculous rhyming poems filled with like weird insults are now in this game. I think there's 15 of them, or maybe 16 if you count the tutorial. Like, that's something that I can really say, yeah, I had a weird impact on this game by bringing that. And then a lot of the stuff, the settlement and the rest of the game, I'm happy with what I was able to contribute. I loved working with that team, three folks, David, Vincent, and Loren. And yeah, making that was really, really cool. I think, yeah, the weirdest little tidbit that is easiest to say, yeah, that's me, is a lot of the fighting.
I love the flight as well.
And a lot of the, yeah. Oh, I'm so glad that delights me, because I think that's a lot of the little fun stuff in the game is what I'm most enamored by. because a lot of a lot of the main beats that I also helped write, they're things that are part of a greater thing, right? They're part of a greater narrative that I'm kind of trying to serve. But there's a lot of little moments, I think, in the settlement, and I'm really enamored with some of the small character details, some of the fun stuff that you can do that's a little more ridiculous. I know that when I have played past Assassin's Creeds, I enjoy the story, but I also enjoy having those little moments where your very serious character can encounter some kind of unusual person or unusual thing and have a different kind of experience, one that's outside of, because I think one of the things that's most fun to me also about Eivor, and the reason that I love fighting and little things in the settlement so much, is that Eivor is such a serious character. She's amazing. She's like so talented. She's a killer. She's a diplomat in many ways. She's very stoic. And getting to write her into these more unusual moments where she's not necessarily equipped, she's more equipped for battle than for comedy. And having that, I think, little incongruity is a lot of fun to play with.
I'll also add that I really love the settlement, and I've only met Yanli for like 2 minutes, and I love her already.
Oh, yay. I'm so glad. And it's another one of those things where like I would love to have more time to explore like smaller characters and give them more arcs, but there's always next time to have that. I think what we have in there is really, really strong and really fun.
Did you also write, since Hytham is also part of the settlement, did you write his parts, or?
Did, yes.
I haven't explored the settlement that much yet. I've built a couple of buildings so far, but not.
Yeah,
so I was just wondering about that, since he's also
yes,
part of the main
I did a lot of the main story stuff, which I won't talk about too much because it's full of spoilers. But some of the even especially like the late game stuff at the settlement, I had a hand in, and it was really fun for me as someone who was handling the settlement pieces of both the main story and those things, because I would see all these different writers writing these amazing arcs, like these incredible mysteries, these incredible like adventures for Eivor, and then my job was often to go, okay, where is she coming from here? What are the consequences of the actions that she performed in this territory, and how can I help you extend that experience? There's one, I'll be spoiler light, but there's one territory where if you do the right thing, you can recruit someone to join your ranks, and getting to kind of like have that character do cool stuff in the territory, and then now she's being handed over to me to kind of take care of for the rest of the game is really cool. So it's yeah, and that's for me the fun stuff of it. I was very fortunate to get to kind of tell some of the quieter stories, some of the more what is Eivor like when she's at home is a question that I often got to answer.
Do you still remember it? It's already been 5 years since Syndicate. I mean, maybe longer for you, but do you remember any quests that you handled there specifically?
There's a couple months, and a lot of it was like a couple of rewrites of late game missions and a metric ton of item descriptions. So my work on that was fairly light in that way, but it was the first time that I got to be kind of immersed in that world, and it gave me a lot of insight into how quest design, and I was more able to kind of shadow folks and support them in that way. But it gave me a lot of insight into how these things are made that I hope I was able to kind of bring to bear in Valhalla.
Awesome.
So our group specifically, the Assassin's Creed Sisterhood, is very interested in not only promoting women in the industry, but we also would really like to see more female characters. So is there any like advice you can give to us that what are some of the things that we as fans can do to encourage studios to give us more titles with leading women?
Honestly, I think you're doing it right now. It's about creating the knowledge that audience exists. It's creating awareness around the fact that that's what you want. It's making yourself known and creating a space for yourself to say, yeah, this is important to me, and I want it. And it is asking for accountability. If we look at, like, again, as we talked about over the summer, with so many things, especially at Ubisoft, that were so predatory, so dangerous for women, for marginalized identities, it's about calling that out and saying that, because for me, I think that it's easy for a lot of people to go like, oh, well, if you don't like it, don't play. But no, it's because you like it, because you want to play, that you care about this. So for me, it's equal parts asking for content to change, saying, I want to see more women. I want to see, more queer characters, more characters of color. I want to see more of these identities represented. And also you have to, if in order for you to do that, you have to clean up your own house. You have to make sure that you're creating a space where that can come to bear. So I think it's and what I appreciate about the sisterhood so much is that it's not just about saying, hey, we want more women in this. It's about saying we want women who are making these things to be cared for, to be supported, and to be defended. And so we care as much about making sure that this company is accountable for its mistakes and for its abuses, while also saying, because we want it to be better, because we actually do care about these things, we care about these characters, we care about this world, we care about the creators, the kind and empathetic people who are working every day on a lot of these products. And we see the people who are doing the work from the inside, and we're fighting for them. Because those are the people who are going to give you the characters that you want. And so they have to be protected first. So I would say that, yeah, it's exactly what you're doing. It's being clear on your position. It's not female characters at any cost. It's not if you put a female character, we'll excuse what you do in the workplace. It's saying, no, everything is important and everything is connected, and we want broad change.
Thank you so much. This has been really educational.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. It wasn't too much of a downer, but yeah, I care a lot about this, and as someone who worked on it, there's this real challenge in saying, hey, I want to see the work that I did and the work of my colleagues represented, but I want to make sure that when I say, hey, buy this game, that money's going to a place that I can put my faith into. It's the same thing where I want to create a space where you can buy this game and feel no amount of conflict in that. And that is, I think, where it becomes, the difference between, visual diversity and actual
That's
representation.
actually something that I would like to ask about. Is a lot of people did feel this kind of conflict when they started hearing these news over the summer. It becomes this question of, do I support the company by buying this game? Like, do I support these practices that have been going on? Am I hurting devs, or am I supporting the devs by buying their work? How do you personally feel about that?
Personally, I really do think it's an individual decision, and I would say that I would lean towards the fact that a lot of the time, supporting the work of the devs is also about supporting the humanity of the devs. It's about saying, hey, I value the work that you do, and I think it's incredible, but here's why I am contested. It's because you weren't treated as well. But I think we can't keep going like, oh, well, if we don't buy it, then they're going to be punished for that, or they're not going to make it, because it is not your fault as a consumer when a corporation treats its employees poorly. It's like when we talk about this idea of crunch in companies, we go, well, sure, they crunched, but we have to support the devs. And it's like, that's not your job. It is the company's job to support and empower the devs to create a product that you will want to buy. And so when it comes to that, I think it is an individual, ethical choice, the same way that, I want to order something from Amazon. Do I want to support Jeff Bezos for this convenience? Sometimes the answer is yes. Other days the answer is no. And we kind of try to do our best with that we, with all those decisions. But largely, I think, I want the vocal support, and I want to be able to have people's work experienced. But if there's a way that we can manage to say, I purchased this game because I want to experience your work, but also I want to work hard, I think that's kind of a happy medium that we can end up in. It's about making those kind of ethical choices, and deciding that even if you make something that you say, like, yeah, it is supporting the company, but it is also creating a space for discussion. I completely respect that, and I do it myself all the time. which I know is kind of a cop-out answer as far as like, there is no ethical consumption under capitalism, or kind of in that vein. But ultimately, I think, we're all caught in this thing that we just have to work harder at pushing back against the things that the bad aspects of this company, the bad structural stuff, and trying our best to support individual developers, trying to hear their stories, give them a space to talk, and say, hey, we're on their side.
I think we're going to have to start wrapping things up. I just want to say that it's been super insightful hearing these stories and your opinions about these things. Like, I've learned a lot today.
I'm glad, and I'm happy to talk anytime. It's been really fun. It's been really engaging, I should say. Fun feels like a weird word, but yeah, it's been a really interesting.
These are important topics that we should be talking more about, and I'm really happy that we had the chance to talk about it with you. So thank you very much for joining us. And thank you as well, Laurie.
Always happy to be here. Thanks again, Kim.
No problem.
So we're going to wrap things up now. Join us again next time on Sisterhood Speaks, and have a good week, everyone. Bye.
Bye.